And it reflects the work that the expert group needs to do. We, however, highlight in the agenda the tier system. So these are in agenda items 4 to 7, but we also shall cover in this third meeting the other tasks of the expert group, and they are for discussion in items 8 to 15. So today, we start focusing on the tier system for the implementation of the global indicators. Before we go to the details, I would like to report on some of the agreements that the expert group has had today and early this afternoon. We would like to clarify and emphasize that we are working with the global indicators. The UN Statistical Commission has already agreed on the initial list of global indicators. There are actually 230 unique global indicators. If you count them, they count to 241 because some are actually representing a number of goals and targets. The countries, therefore, can already start discussing their priorities given this global list. The role of the expert group is to come up with a tier system that shall be helpful in various ways. The expert group has agreed that for this third meeting, we shall focus on discussing Tier 3 indicators as initially already classified using the definition of the tiers that has also been approved in the UN Statistical Commission, and I will read those definitions later. The aim then is for the expert group to listen, to discuss on issues for these indicators initially classified as Tier 3. We are eager to discuss technical issues so that we can process well the tier system. Indicators that are initially classified as Tiers 1 and 2 shall not be discussed in this meeting. However, the expert group, after this meeting, shall continue discussing the tiers, all of them, Tiers 1, 2, and 3, given the inputs in this meeting, and we hope to be able to finish discussion within 2 months. So it's an indicative schedule. Thus, our goal is within 2 months, we should be able to release our proposed tier system, Tiers 1, 2, and 3. We shall also be including additional information aside from the tiers. 2 specific information that we shall include in the tier system. One is the number of countries that already have methodology and data for particular indicators, and of course information specifically on why a particular indicator is classified as Tier 3. What will be the use of the tier system that the expert group will release? It is our understanding, and it will be inputs to the work that the expert group will be doing. Look at interlinkages, looking at data disaggregation, looking at capacity building. From the discussions that we've had in the expert group, I am understanding that this tier system will really be vital in providing information to all of us on which indicators countries really need capacity building, okay? Because this will also include understanding of data gaps. For this meeting, we've also agreed that we will not be as strict as we were in the second meeting in terms of amount of time and who speaks first. But we, Enrique and I, of course, should be able to manage time because we don't want to stay here after 6. I know that most of you arrived late last night, or some of you arrived today, so maybe we should be easy on ourselves this afternoon, and so that we can re-energize and refresh ourselves tonight for the meeting tomorrow. So we, of course, shall be requesting comments from the members of the expert group as first, but we shall be flexible as to who will be giving comments and inputs in following the members' comments. With that, I would like now to start with our discussions on indicators initially classified as Tier 3. But may I please just read again what was agreed as the definition for Tiers 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 are I'm sorry. I'm taking on what Ben is supposed to do. So let me please call on Ben to guide us through this tier system, after which we will be requesting a number of presentations, statements for goals 1, 2, 10, 3, 4, and 5. So we aim to discuss all of these goals this afternoon. Ben, please.
Okay, good afternoon. Can we get the PowerPoint up on the screen, please? Okay, well, I'll just start anyway, and then we can catch up once it gets out there. So this is a brief presentation about the document that you all have on the provisional tier classifications of the indicators. So at the request of the IAEG co-chairs, the Secretariat circulated an online questionnaire to UN agencies, entities, and organizations requesting information on the agreed global SDG indicators. And the questionnaire sought information on metadata, methodology, international standards, data availability, data disaggregation, and any other relevant information that could be useful in making a decision on the tier of an indicator. So during this time period that we were soliciting responses, which was a fairly short time period, we received over 380 individual responses from the UN agencies and organizations. Each response corresponds to an individual indicator from an individual agency. And at the end, we received at least one response for all but 30 indicators. And these responses were compiled into an Excel document by the Secretariat and then summarized into the document that we have shared for this meeting. So just to review the criteria for indicator tiers, Tier 1 indicators are indicators that are conceptually clear, have an established methodology and standards are available, and data is regularly produced by countries. Tier 2, the indicator is conceptually clear, established methodology and standards are available, but data are not regularly produced by the countries. And Tier 3 are indicators for which there are no established methodology and standards, or the methodology and standards are still being developed and or tested. And just to give you a little bit more information on how we determined between Tier 1 and Tier 2 for our initial classifications, basically we put the cutoff at 50% of countries had data for the indicator with representation across all regions of the world. If it met that, we put it into Tier 1, so it was in some ways a relatively low bar for moving it into the Tier 1 classification. And if it was Tier 2, you could have a greater percentage of countries with data, but if there was data missing for an entire region of the world, it would still be moved into Tier 2 because that would mean that sort of capacity building would be necessary in that particular region of the world. So after receiving all of the responses from the UN agencies, the Secretariat verified the tier selection made by the agencies in order to ensure consistency in the tiering system across indicators compiled by different agencies and entities. So we looked a little bit at the sort of data coverage and the methodology and compared that to the tier proposed by the agency. And in a couple cases, we made a change to the initial proposed tier. It was about 30 to 35 cases, the Secretariat changed the tier selection of the individual indicator. And then there were also the 30 cases where there was no information provided for a particular indicator, and the Secretariat did its best to propose an indicator, but you'll see throughout the document that there's still many indicators where there is no proposed tier at all at this point. So some of the reasons for changing the tier from what the agencies initially proposed to what you find currently in the document are that the indicators that were classified as Tier 1 or 2 did not have an agreed methodology that had been tested. So in these cases, those indicators were moved to Tier 3. In other cases, the data coverage of the indicator differed from that of its tier assignment. So we would either move it in a couple cases even from a Tier 2 classification to Tier 1, and in other cases from Tier 1 to Tier 2. In other cases, there were conflicting methodologies amongst different agencies that submitted information for one indicator, so they would then be classified as Tier 3 as the different methodologies were sort of discussed amongst the agencies and also the countries to determine what the agreed methodology would be for that particular global indicator. And then finally, some indicators were assigned multiple tiers based on different aspects of the indicator. One example of this is the indicator that deals with representation of women in national and local parliaments. For national parliaments, it would be a Tier 1 indicator because data is widely available. There's an agreed methodology. But for local governments, there's really no established methodology or data available, so it was classified as Tier 3. And we'll have a short presentation on this particular indicator a little bit later on this afternoon. So here's a brief table with some results of the tiers. Once again, we should all remember that these are very provisional in nature. They will be updated with the discussion of IAEG members and through consultations with the other relevant stakeholders and organizations. But as you can see here, I guess we don't need to go through goal by goal and talk about how many different indicators are classified in each tier, but if we move to the end, we can see that there are 98 indicators that are classified as Tier 1, 50 Tier 2, and 78 Tier 3, with 15 that are either don't have a classification or they're one of these combined classifications where there's sort of different parts of the indicator are in different tiers. And then so the next steps with the indicator tiers are there'll be discussions throughout the next day and a half of this meeting on the Tier 3 indicators where we'll hear short presentations from some of the agencies responsible for methodological work on these indicators that will then discuss to try to create a work plan between the agencies and the countries to sort of move forward and create an agreed methodology. And we should remember the document's a living document, very provisional, and this is only a draft proposal that will be changed with the inputs from the members and additional consultations going forward. So proposed changes to the tiers or methodological information to support a different tier should be provided to the Secretariat as soon as it's available. So as work progresses, as data becomes more widely available, we can change the tier of specific indicators, and then this document will also be updated based on the discussions and outcomes of this meeting, and it will continue to be updated as more information is received moving forward. And then a final thing, there are probably 10 to 15 indicators right now that we don't have a good idea of who the custodian international agency would be to monitor those indicators. So this is another sort of open topic that will need to be discussed so that we can have sort of global monitoring of all 230 indicators that are part of the global indicator framework. So I guess I will stop there on the initial introduction of the document, and if anybody has any, I guess, specific comments or questions regarding it, we can take them now before we move to discussing the Tier 3 indicators under each goal. So thank you.
Thank you, Ben. So I would like now to open the floor for any questions, comments, clarifications, and I would like to call on US.
Thank you for your presentation. I had a few questions I am hoping that perhaps you can clarify for us. The first is the definition and expectations regarding the designation of a custodian agency for each indicator. I imagine that this had been discussed perhaps when the tiers were proposed by the UN agencies. But it's something that I think that at least my country is very interested in. The second regards the designation of Tier 2 indicators. When the criteria is that 50% or more of countries have these data or can produce the statistics, including some representation across all regions, when we say that these countries have data, does this refer to countries who have data that are modeled or actually collect and produce the data? Modeling from a very nascent stage rather than modeling to adjust for age distribution in the population, for example. The third item is, my third question is the use of this tiering system. I think more traditionally or commonly in UN expert groups, sometimes a tiering system is used to designate the kinds of working groups that should be established to lift up the methodology for a set of indicators. And here I'm curious to hear your thoughts about understanding of Tier 2 versus Tier 3 and what kind of support or entity or groups would be created to lift up those indicators. I ask because if we're going through this process of identifying an appropriate tier designation for each indicator, I think some stronger understanding or expectation for what this tiering will mean in terms of reporting or in terms of being brought forward to the HLG or something that is going to be discussed more within the IAEG would be helpful to understand. So those are my three questions at the moment. The definition of custodian agencies for the indicators and the intention behind that. The second, meaning for Tier 2 indicators, when we say 50% of the countries having the data, does this refer to countries who have data that are modeled and therefore available, or countries that actually collect and produce the statistics? And the third is the use of the tiering designation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to give quick answers first before we go to the next question. So the first question on identification of the custodian agency, the comments that were collected were basically from those agencies that are naturally the ones that develop indicators and monitor them. So if these are on agriculture, then of course we request FAO. So the current inputs from what we call custodian agencies are really based on which agencies are currently monitoring and working on this particular indicators. The expert group actually discussed this in the meeting, in the closed meeting, and so this will actually be further discussed when we actually go into the development of the metadata. The question on Tier 2 indicators, as to whether they are modeled or actually collected, the inputs on data availability are actually based on the comments and inputs from the current international agencies. So we still need, of course, to develop the metadata, and that's where more discussion will be done. On the tiering system, this tiering system, as I mentioned earlier, will actually be inputs to the future work of the expert group, and this will be used in the different work groups that we plan to create. So like we could have, as I just before, a work group on interlinkages, data disaggregation. So the main objective of the tier system will really be as inputs for all of this work that needs to be done, but of course, inputs the high-level group that will really be looking into partnerships, coordination, and capacity building. I think this question will be asked again, and we will have more clear answers when I say we, the expert group, as we move forward. I would like now to call on Japan and then Italy. Japan, please.
And yes, Japan is not a member country, but observer country. But I suppose every time a candid and honest comment is informative for everyone. So I'd like to express our ideas after consulting with our country's ministries. Yes, first, I understand your plan, but originally I believe that we can consider the tier system of each indicator after the indicators are finalized. Even if discuss the classification of the tier of each indicator this time, those discussions will not be very meaningful if the indicator will be defined or modified if necessary. Yeah, for example, Japan expressed concern about indicator 2.B.1 and 3.8.2. And moreover, in addition, it may turn out to be an inefficient process, as it will be very difficult for each country to consider its data availability. This is because the metadata, which encompass a full description of the indicator definitions, underlying concepts, methods of data collection, data sources, and other relevant information, have not been developed yet. Therefore, we argue that the IAEG-SDGs should discuss the review of indicators and development of metadata more before discussing the classification of the tier of each indicator. Also, the tier classification should be conducted objectively and automatically under a definite criteria based on the existence of a methodology agreed upon internationally and objectively, as well as on each country's data availability. Therefore, we argue that after the modification of indicators and establishment of metadata, the survey of the data availability in all countries, not organizations, in all countries should be conducted again in the same manner as that in which the assessment of proposed indicators was made in March 2015, and that the classification of tiers should be based on the results from such a survey. Thus, during the third meeting regarding tiers, we also argue that discussion should focus on the necessary process and criteria for the establishment of tier system, including criteria for tier classification. Nevertheless, I understand that, right now there is a schedule. Even if the discussion should be held on the classification of tiers, the classification will be a tentative process due to reasons stated earlier. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think I would like to answer again this question. The expert group actually has discussed these issues, and we've decided that these issues that you are presenting are actually two separate issues. The tier system and the review and enhancement or revision of the indicators. So we will treat them separately. The tier system is what we want to focus on. And yes, metadata development is very important, but in the definition of tiers 1, 2, and 3, we actually imply there that there are metadata already available. And so tier 1, for example, there are existing metadata that are available. That's why they're in tier 1. Your issue actually on develop the metadata first and then classify them. Exactly, that's what has been done as reported on by Benjamin. So we asked the development partners, the international agencies, if there are existing metadata for specific indicators, and those that are 0 are tier 3. So these are what metadata development should be done. So the work on metadata development is also another work stream for the expert group. So what the expert group agreed on is that we have to be very clear to ourselves what it is that we are working with. So tier system, and then of course the plan, the work plan for the review and revision and enhancement of the indicators. The initial list, of course, will follow. But I would like to already say that we have also agreed in the expert group that we have just started with this initial list. So we have to start with this first, and then it's not good to immediately revise when we haven't yet done anything on it. So that's already what I would like to say. But thank you very much for your reminders. Italy, please.
Thank you, Chair, for let us put some question and reflection on the tiers system presentation. First, I would like to express the Italian point of view on data availability. You mentioned that the criteria is from UN agency evaluation on country availability. From the Italian point of view, I would like to suggest the country point of view, and this is because it's closely related to the HLG group analysis, and we have to start from now asking countries the data availability. And I wonder how we can define metadata without having such an analysis on data gaps. Just to give you some inputs, at least we have to know the availability of data right now, the availability of data in X time with minor investment, and data availability not yet planned by country for which we have major investments. So I think this could give us also some inputs for discussing metadata. And the second question related to this is when IAEG is going to approve the metadata, let's say manual, all the documents related to metadata. This is quite an important issue because I'm share with you the national experience. When for example, civil society or ministries or, I don't know, university and the other private sectors ask us which kind of input we can give to you. All the time I say to them, look to the metadata inside the website. But I'm not sure that the final version that everybody can find in the IAEG web is the metadata approved by the IAEG. So I think if I can suggest that we have also to define, you have to define rules for having this approval on metadata. And just the third question, and then I'll stop it. Concerning the discussion of indicators, most of all the indicators that we think are not well representative of the target, from our point of view, just to give you an example why we want to rediscuss or have more clarification on the discussion on tier system, For example, from our point of view, we would like to open again the discussion on climate change and why not emissions are not there, because Paris 21 also discussing emissions, and there are so many UN specific group dealing with these emissions. Then migrations is another issue that we would like to discuss a little bit again. Then subjective indicators, the use of subjective indicators. Then well-being indicators is not sufficient to have only one indicators under means of implementation. It's a composite indicators, very complex, and we would like to discuss again. Just to give you some example on the topics that we want to discuss again inside the discussion of the tier system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to assure you that these questions were actually discussed by the expert group. That is why we didn't finish our discussion this morning. So just to quickly answer the question on data availability, as I mentioned earlier, aside what the expert group is planning to do is this, that aside from doing the classification of the tiers, as discussed by Benjamin earlier, we will actually add additional information, specifically on which countries already have these data and what data are being collected. So that is really a question similar to what the question of the US. So those are what the expert group will be collecting information on, what you refer to as the country perspective. So we will look also at availability from the country, what they are actually collecting. As regards the metadata, so I must confess that the expert group has not actually reached that discussion yet. So we're focused on finishing this tier system plus additional information, but of course, always part of our discussion is the development of the metadata. So we shall again be updating everyone who would be interested, and we will actually also, of course, get inputs from experts on this. As regards indicators which are said to be not appropriate for targets, again, the expert group has discussed that, and we decided that, well, that will actually be part of the procedure which we need to establish on methodological review of indicators. That is where we will be looking at the indicators. And we have agreed that the tier system and the additional information can actually stand on their own, separate from the discussion on, is this indicator appropriate for that particular goal? We believe that maybe even some tier 1 that has been classified already could be considered as not appropriate. So that will be part of the procedure. The procedure is still going to be discussed on Friday on this review, but that question on these particular targets will be part of that review. I hope the body doesn't mind that the expert group actually agreed that this is not the time for us, this meeting, to discuss really specific indicators which are for review, but we are going to discuss procedures, the rules, so that everything will be very clear on moving forward. UNIDO, please, and then UNACE. UNIDO, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to point out two things. So one, when we were selecting the indicators in Bangkok meeting, we made it very clear that a lack of data at this moment should not be an obstruction of selecting the indicator if it makes sense to correctly reflect the target. So data available or not available was not the criteria of selecting indicator when we met in Bangkok, if the indicator correctly reflects the target. That we have to make sure also now. Number two, although international organizations have the mandate, it does not mean that they collect all the data that country has. I have experience from the industrial statistics. We have the mandate, but we do not collect all industrial data that country collects. So we should also keep in mind that I support Italy in this sense, that there are a range of data which are available in the country but not available in the international organization. And on the other hand, there are some international data collection program. International agencies collect the data directly, conducting their own survey, and those data may be or may not be in the National Statistical Database. This situation we have to take into account. Thank you.
Thank you. UNECE, please.
Thank you. I have just a simple comment that it's very important to communicate clearly outside this group what this tier system means. Because some people understand this, that if an indicator is tier 3, that means this is an indicator of less importance, some kind of third rate indicator, that the policies this indicator is trying to measure are less important. And then I get concerned phone calls from my colleagues in EC that why their indicator was downgraded to tier 3 and that I should somehow at the meeting support that it would be upgraded to tier 2. I think people inside the group understand what it means, but outside it may be misinterpreted, including among policymakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I hope that everybody doesn't mind that I'm closing the comments now because we have to discuss the goals, but I would like to just quickly address UNIDO and UNECE. I would like to clarify the tier system is not about which indicator is more important than which one, and it doesn't say that this one is not appropriate. So the tier system already was explained how the tier system is defined. I hope that is clear to everybody. So the tier system was created just so we have an idea as to which indicators already have clear methodology and available data. And with tier 2, it's like there still needs improvement, and tier 3 is really where we don't have the data. And yes, all 230 indicators are equally important. So this tier system is not about which is important or which is relevant and which is not appropriate. So it's really just looking at the technical aspects of the indicators. And yes, as mentioned earlier, aside from the tier classification that the expert will do, we will have additional information from the countries, which data they are already producing. For these particular indicators, and thank you for the reminder that the expert group should communicate this information to all who are not here with us. Now, my co-chair is asking me to still open the discussion, so may I just give two more, the US and, yes please? The US please, and then, yes, Habitat, UN Habitat.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I know that you already allowed me to speak. I'm just reflecting on the comments that we've heard from the group before we've begun discussion in earnest on Tier 3. And from my perspective, it sounds like we have a lot of questions about process. And it is perplexing to me that our topics for discussion that relate to process, our rules of the road, how we will go about this, are slated at the end of the agenda. And I understand well that many of these discussions have taken place in closed meetings with the members, and I fully appreciate that. But I also understand that those conversations occurred this morning or later in the afternoon, so they did not have an opportunity to explain it to their colleagues. So what I'm registering here or making a note of that I think we might be well served by reconsidering the order of items in the agenda. I understand the agenda was adopted without discussion, but we didn't really have an opportunity to understand how to approach the agenda because the members were still discussing these items as of this morning. So I ask us to reconsider because I think that if we want to have engagement and transparency and a rich discussion, then there are many of us who haven't been meeting behind these closed doors, who are glad to be here, who would like to participate, but don't understand the rules under which we're operating, or even why we're focusing with Tier 3 if we are meaning to begin reporting this summer on some of the indicators. Thank you.
UN Habitat, please.
Thank you. One question. We are planning to organize expert group meetings on a specific Tier 2 and some Tier 3 indicators in April and beginning of May with different UN agencies, but also international partners. The conclusions of these expert group meetings, we would like to use them as an agreed consensual methodology for the specific indicators. The question to you is, can we submit this to the interagency or to the HLG as a way of saying this is the unified proposed methodology of this custodian agency for this particular indicator, to avoid that in one moment there could be 2 or 3 tracks of possible methods of data collection of the indicator, and then you can help to disseminate this as the way that this indicator in the future, through this consensus mechanism, should be collected.
Thank you. I'll answer the first question. The answer is yes. But as to the suggestion of the US, I hope you don't mind, we have agreed on the agenda item already. Now, as to the work of the expert group that we will be discussing first, which is the tier system, we actually discussed in the closed meeting more the procedure that we will follow for this third meeting. That's really the discussion in the closed meeting. We were discussing how to proceed with this meeting. And yes, it is very important that everybody sees tiers 1, 2, and 3. Actually, many of us wanted to do that, but we have a constraint on data, on time, and we want to focus our attention on tier 3 simply because we want to hear inputs for these indicators for which there are no agreed methodology yet and no clear data availability. I believe that the order of the agenda will actually not affect the discussion, because the next items for discussion are really next work streams for the expert group. So we will still be able to address the concerns as mentioned by the US, even as we still follow the proposed agenda. Thank you very much. And so I would like now to start with the discussion for the first set of goals that we would like to talk about. And again, I would like to emphasize that we're discussing tier 3. The first set of goals are goals 1, 2, and 10. And we have an initial classification of 2 indicators under goal 1 as tier 3, 1 indicator tier 3 for goal 2, and 5 for goal 10. For the discussion of the first indicator, 1.4.2, I would like to call on UN Habitat. And we will request UN, the presenters to just present where they are.
Yes. It is updated, it's connected.
Okay.
It's there. Yes. Put it. Since I'm here, I can just make comments. But where is it? Okay. Why is it not coming? Okay. Well, yes. Thank you. I'm making a presentation on this indicator just to remind you. It's about secure tenure rights to land, and it is measured through mechanisms, legally recognized documentation, and perceived land rights. This indicator is presented not only by UN Habitat, it's presented on behalf of World Bank and FAO. This indicator, as it was asked, even if it's tier 3, to tell you that we have already an important history of data collection of this indicator. UN Habitat, based on the Habitat Agenda, Istanbul Declaration 96, and thereafter the Urban Indicators Program, started collecting data on security of tenure since 96 to 2002. Can you remove this thing? Immediately after, also very important to say that the SLAM indicator of the MDGs, one of the components of the SLAMs was also security of tenure. We have some problems at the time. We developed something on this, and the Global Land Tool Network, which is a coalition of different institutions, has been working on this. The World Bank has also an important story of data collection on security of tenure. Doing Business Index and Report has produced information for more than 189 countries on this. It's already published. They also have the household survey on the land component with microdata on land, and some supplementary questions on parcels and security of tenure. FAO, UN Women, and others are going to do something important, are already doing, is to make sure that this indicator really dialogues with other land indicators, as we are going to see. FAO works from the completely different perspective, which is very important for the complementarity of the indicator, which is the agricultural census, and UN Women from a gender perspective on this. Some elements about the international standards. To repeat, we are going to measure legally recognized documentation by type and the perception of rights on security of tenure. This information in both cases can be disaggregated by sex and is strongly connected to 5A1, agricultural people land, and 5A2, which is a process-oriented indicator of land. The strategy that we are proposing all these agencies is twofold. One is to collect data on administrative records that already exist on land, and the second to conduct a specific household survey data. We can start from now with our databases, the collection of this information. Obviously, we need to improve both systems of administrative and household survey information, and this partnership can do this. For administrative data, to remind you that we can collect information, the World Bank is doing this, on tenure type by registered parcels. We can also, from public registers, look at the timely collection and disaggregation of information. It has a relatively good coverage. It includes communal land and other forms of land. And it can be, as already World Bank is doing, to link this, for instance, to information on cards on planning and taxes, also as a way of looking at documentation from records. UN Habitat has been collecting information on household surveys. Today, more than 20 countries already data collected, method already proved. This works when administrative information is not good enough. We can also look at information when there is a lot of informality or when there are some barriers to collect the information. Household surveys are very important for that. UN expertise then can provide technical support to countries, create systems, use databases, and expand and enhance them. World Bank, as I said, household surveys, Doing Business Land Program, UN Habitat through the Urban Indicator surveys, and the FAO through agricultural census. Just to tell you that it will be relatively easy and possible to create an international standards with all this process as information, understanding that we are working with land rights and perception as a proxy of security of tenure. It includes women tenure and other information. It looks at, this is very important, to the contextual aspects of tenure security of different countries in the sense of the plurality of different tenure regimes, and also understanding that all this process need to be reinforced. I would like to conclude to say this is more or less the roadmap with a specific time frames you are going to see how we are going to move from now. We need to refine the survey tools, set protocols, standards. We need to provide some surveys guidance to countries, expand collaboration with different national and local stakeholders, obviously national statistic offices, include disaggregation mechanisms, initiate training to countries and cities, and produce the first estimates. We believe that in 2017, March sometime, we can report back to this group. And also our aim or our goal is that 80% in the near future of standardized data could be collected like this. Very last slide. the possible custodian for the time being is indicated World Bank, and obviously UN Habitat would like to be associated to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to open the floor for discussions. I would like to look at the expert group members first.
Just to say that
Yes.
FAO and World Bank that participated in this will be also commented.
Yes, please. The World Bank.
Oh, thank you very much. I just want to thank Eduardo for making that presentation on behalf of both agencies. So we've coordinated to make sure you got some information about that. And just to emphasize the basic strategy here that we see, that the first thing is this indicator requires that you use both administrative and household survey data, both registers and mine household survey data. We intend to start really by mining the data that's there, looking at what's in registers, looking at what's in surveys, and then moving from that towards getting more methodology improvements going forward to both admin systems and household surveys. It's not super trivial. It means working with those admin systems, those registration systems, and it means working with household surveys. The particular difficulty of that, of course, is the perception question on security of tenure, which is a tricky question whenever you ask that in surveys. And finally, just to stress that this is a partnership effort between us, UN Habitat, and all the other agencies that Eduardo mentioned. Thank you very much for the floor. Thank you.
Thank you to the World Bank for additional inputs. Questions, please? Sweden, please.
Thank you very much. A question that we've had is if you look at as a proportion of what? So it's like, what is the total that you're comparing it with? Are the surveys both looking at who owns land, but how do you cover the proportion of people who need to own land in order to have a functioning economy?
May I request UN Habitat or World Bank to answer?
Yes, if we talk about the survey, obviously it is the proportion of the population that has secure right land and the total population survey. And so we are referring is a percentage that is extracted from those that have the rights from the total population survey. And from there, eventually you can, depending on the robustness of the survey, to extrapolate to the whole city. But this is the way the process is collected, which has already been done in the past.
Samoa, please.
Thank you. I just want clarification on land rights. For us in the Pacific, the lands are customary lands. Are you referring to rights, customary rights, or you're referring to legal? This is a separate issue of ownership and rights to land. There's also, because there's a difference of rights to customary lands and ownership of land, freehold land. Can that be clarified, please?
May I call on World Bank this time?
Yes, thanks. We sort of started off with a longer presentation which had some of these details included, but we decided to shorten it a little bit for interest of time. But it's true that land registries sometimes include, I mean, land registries can be strong on including the differences between communal land and other kinds of land. The other thing we want to measure or we're asked to measure in this indicator is informality. And there are many countries and regions where land is registered informally and will not be recorded in registered. And that's one of the pros of using survey data compared to the con of a land registry. It won't be there in the land registry. But I think the short answer is yes, we need to cover and disaggregate among all those different types of land ownership, whether it be formal, documented, legally documented and registered, or whether it be informal and not registered in some countries. And that's the reason, I think, one of the reasons why you need this sort of dual track approach. Thanks.
Thank you very much. May I call on the US, please?
Thank you. Just for point of clarification, when we receive these presentations, should we be thinking to ourselves as observer countries, do we agree with the designation of Tier 3 in this case, and that the important definitions of terms within the indicator are not specified well enough, that reporting on this indicator should not proceed? Is that what we're meant to reflect upon? Or are we meant to reflect upon how our individual countries would be contributing to the calculation of the indicator? In the latter case, I'm thinking, oh, my Census Department could produce something. Am I meant then to send it to U.S. Habitat? Am I meant to comment on that aspect? Or am I meant to be reflecting on whether or not I believe that this is correctly designated as Tier 3? So maybe you could clarify? Thank you.
The goal of this meeting is really for us to listen to inputs from various sectors on indicators that have initially been classified as Tier 3. One of the questions asked is really about reporting mechanisms. I think moving forward, once the metadata are established by the agreed upon custodian agency or agencies, the next step will be the reporting mechanisms. The countries to, some of the indicators may not be produced by the countries, but mainly those indicators that will have to be produced by the countries, how will they be reported? So there's actually an agenda item on Friday, which is really on this discussion on reporting mechanisms. Does that clarify, Jennifer? Yeah. So actually the agreement of the expert group is really to listen to inputs on these indicators that have been classified as Tier 3. As I mentioned earlier, moving forward, the expert group needs to still discuss not just this Tier 3, but all the other indicators already initially classified as Tiers 1 and 2. And we have given ourselves an indicative schedule of 2 months to discuss these. So I hope that clarifies the objective of this meeting that we are having. Again, I would like to clarify for the discussion on the tier system, we focus on indicators initially classified as Tier 3, given the definitions discussed with us earlier. And the expert group is here to listen to these inputs and ask clarificatory questions. But the job is not finished here. We are going to still continue the discussion, not just of Tier 3, but Tiers 1 and 2 as well. UN Women, please. Where's Papa? UN Women? UN Women and then World Bank.
Yes, thank you. It was just to add to the question the U.S. has asked. I think as international agencies, at least for the Tier 3 indicators, we still have some questions. It's not like we have answers. So what we would also appreciate is really feedback from countries in terms of, the way forward, the processes that we are presenting and so on, to have a frank discussion about these indicators. It's because we don't have answers that we are having that discussion now.
My understanding really from the discussion of the expert group is that once we have some discussion on these tiers and we have a tier system, we really will have like task forces or working groups focusing on how to develop specifically metadata for Tier 3. But of course, we also have to discuss on thematic indicators. So there's, as I've said earlier, the work of the expert group is huge. We are trying to work in a focused manner, so we have some work to start with. And for this meeting, we're discussing the tier system, specifically Tier 3. With that, World Bank, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to make pretty much the same point as Papa and be in agreement with with him. From our point of view, I guess, or at least from my point of view, as a potential custodian agency, for example, for this indicator. I mean, remember, this is an indicator with no methodology and no data, right? So that's a big work plan we're being asked to take on. We have some experts that work on this, and we've given you our thoughts today. What we'd really like to hear, I think, from the expert group is some advice and some thoughts on, you know, is this right? Does it sound right? Are there things we need to take into account? Are there groups we could present this to and discuss with? You know, that's from our point of view, at least, from my point of view, that would be really helpful to have. Thanks.
Yes, and we go back to the principle behind the work of the expert group. It has been clarified that this is country-led. So really, we have to discuss with our experts, the international agencies, on these metadata. So this will be moving forward. I expect that the working groups that we might be creating on specific indicators will really be a combination of different stakeholders. May I go to the next indicator for goal 1? This is indicator 1.5.1. Well, this is actually a group of indicators. Indicators 1.5.1 to 1.5.3. UN ISDR, please.
I will speak from where I'm sitting. I asked my staff to prepare a PowerPoint presentation for me. Unfortunately, they gave me 42 slides. And as I only have 5 minutes, I'll just speak to the slides rather than show them to you. But I'll try and cover basically 3 issues. One is the process around the indicators. Secondly, some of the technical issues regarding the indicators. And then thirdly, some of the way forward which we can see. So these indicators, which have to do with a number of deaths, missing people, and persons affected by disasters, which also have to do with direct disaster economic loss in relation to GDP, and they have to do with a number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies, are indicators which are common to the SDGs and to the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. The Sendai framework, I think, as you probably all know, is another global framework that was adopted by the GA in June last year. After adopting the framework, the GA also created an open-ended intergovernmental working group, which is a set of member state experts and also experts from international agencies, which started its work in Geneva in September last year. And they will finish its work at the end of this year. Its last meeting is scheduled for November of 2016. And its job is to obviously define the indicators, but also address issues related to terminology, to data availability, to data standards, and to methodology. So we have another, on the Sendai framework side, we have another process analogous to this process driven by member states, which is specifically looking at this set of indicators that's going on the Geneva side. In terms of the technical issues with respect to the indicators, in terms of definitions, we see little problems, or say very few problems, around the number of deaths and missing persons. This is fairly straightforward. Around affected people, there is considerable discussion still going on in the OEIWG regarding the definition of affected by disasters. Affected by disasters can mean anything from having completely lost your house and having to migrate, through to having the power cut off for a few hours. So there's a need to clearly define what we mean by affected. In terms of direct disaster economic loss, the open-ended intergovernmental working group at present is looking at a simplified version of the ECLAC methodology for estimating disaster economic loss, which has been around for 20 or so years, but that needs to be simplified for the purposes we're going to use. And damage to critical infrastructure, again, there's debate on to which sectors of critical infrastructure it will be actually feasible to cover or not under this indicator. In terms of data availability, this data will have to come from what we call national disaster loss databases. So these are databases of historical disaster loss and damage that are owned and managed by national governments. Currently, around 84 countries report disaster loss and damage data to UNISDR. And of this, our current estimate is we have around 60 countries where the data has a suitable quality and coverage. So that's 60 out of 193 member states. It means still we have another 123 to go before we get global coverage. Most of the 84 countries I've mentioned are using an ad hoc data standard. In other words, they're using similar definitions and attributes of the data they're collecting. And this standard has also been adopted by some regional groups of countries, notably recently in Europe, but we still don't have an international standard for the data fixed in stone. We also have a minimum involvement currently of national statistical offices, as most of the data is currently collected, recorded, and managed by civil defense, civil protection, and national emergency offices. Therefore, there will be a clear issue of how we can achieve better integration and coherence within governments between what's happening on the disaster risk management side and what's happening on the side of national statistical offices. I should also emphasize that it's critical that the data is collected nationally. Currently, all the national disaster loss database data that we manage is georeferenced down to the local government level, typically the level of the district or the municipality. And this is critical because of the scope of disaster that was addressed in the Sendai framework, which covers all disasters, large and small. So a storm that rips the roof off 5 houses in a village has to be counted, as well as the very large disasters which are subject to international assistance. In terms of the data, we also will have to address data normalization issues if we're able to compare, again in the Sendai framework, a baseline which is the average loss between 2005 and 2015, and the loss which countries will experience between 2020 and 2030. Normalization will be critically important because some of this data, particularly mortality, tends to be concentrated in a few very large events. For example, the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami disaster or the 2010 Haiti earthquake. So there are clear normalization issues which will also have to be addressed and agreed by the open-ended intergovernmental working group. So just to finalize, in terms of looking forward, by the end of this year, the OEIWG should have agreed the indicators, it should have agreed the data standards, it should have agreed the methodologies for calculating the data, and it should also have agreed on the normalization issues as well. So our expectation is that by the end of 2016, some of these indicators can then actually move from a tier 3 into a tier 2 level because they will have a clear international agreement behind them. The next timeline, or let's say landmark for us, will be towards the end of 2017, when we need to try and bring countries up to actually achieving coverage of baseline data. And as I said, because of the way the Sendai framework was phrased, this means actually having a baseline of what the average losses were between 2005 and 2015. But given that we're starting off from only 60 countries out of 193, which currently have suitable data, that's quite an uphill trek we're going to have to do over the next year and a half to bring everyone up to the same place. However, the necessary technical knowledge, expertise exists not only in UNISDR, but also in UNDP and in a number of other agencies to provide technical assistance to the countries that require it. And I will finish there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would like to clarify that these indicators are actually part of the development of indicators parallel to the work of the expert group. And this is by the work given by the UN General Assembly to the group of countries that are working on disaster-related indicators under the Sendai framework. So that comment really is for me to assure everyone that the development of this indicator is quite in the right direction. If there are no questions, so this is really a very specialized indicator, and we give this to the working group created by the UN General Assembly on the Sendai framework indicators. And the expert group has agreed that we will work on the indicators that the group will develop. We may go now to goal 2, and I would like to say that we will discuss goal 2 and goal 10, and we'll have a quick coffee break before we go to the next goals. So for goal 2, I would like to call on FAO.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I can also stay in my... I don't know how. Okay. Okay. Thank you. For goal 2, we have a number of indicators that are classified as tier 3, and we generally agree with this classification of the indicator, except for one indicator that I will explain in my presentation. So, first of all, there are 2 indicators to monitor target 2.3, and just as a reminder, target 2.3 aims at doubling the agricultural productivity and incomes of smallholder farmers, of small-scale producers. And the 2 indicators look at the 2 components of the target. One indicator looks at the productivity of smallholder farmers, whereas the second indicator looks at the income. Now, if we look at the current formulation of the indicator, we see already some small problems that can be easily solved. First of all, the first indicator is expressed in terms of volume of production, but of course we cannot measure in terms of volume of production, in terms of quantity. This indicator has to be measured in terms of values, even if, of course, in constant prices. So that is the spirit, I think, of the indicator. So value in constant prices. The second point is, are we measuring only the agriculture-related income or the total income of farmers, of small-scale food producers? And the third point is, who are these small-scale food producers? Because we can have a broader definition that includes also the small industries that process food. But we want to exclude this aggregate from the analysis. There are more fundamental problems, both from the methodological and from the measurement point of view. From the methodological point of view, we don't have an international agreed definition of small-scale food producers. What is a small scale? And I think this is a problem also for the industrial sector. So we don't have a minimum size. And we need an international agreed definition in order to be able to produce comparable data across countries and across sectors. Other problems are more measurement problems. We still face big problems in measuring agricultural production and also labor input in agriculture. And these are essential in order to have good measurement of productivity, and on the other side, the accurate measurement of all sources of revenues for the small-scale food producers in order to have an overall reliable estimates of their income by enterprise size, by sex and indigenous status as required by the target. But another key problem is data availability. So in this case, we have very few data at the international level. The main source of this information could be integrated agricultural surveys that collect information not only on the production of the farm, but also on the income and on the social aspect of the farm. Currently, mainly there is the example of the LSMS, the Living Standard Measurement Survey, ESA, extended with a module on the agricultural sector that is conducted only in 7 countries in Africa. And this is the reason why we have launched a new program of farm survey, of agricultural integrated surveys, which is considered as a multi-purpose farm survey with a rotating module in a 10-year cycle, so in between 2 censuses. And this is the structure of the modules, so a module that is running every year, structural models that are required every 3 to 5 years, and then, of course, and through these modules we can respond to many of the indicators that are requested by the SDG. The current work done in FAO is, first of all, in establishing this database. We have already processed, for this purpose, the survey that are available, but of course the number of data points are still limited. There is a possibility of expanding this, but this possibility of expansions are limited, unless we have a major effort from a capacity development point of view in increasing this, the availability of integrated agricultural surveys. And for this purpose, so we are developing the guidelines on collecting this type of information. We have established already, since the beginning of this year, a global survey hub, together with the USDA, with the World Bank, and already we have experts of these 3 organizations sitting under the same roof, in order to provide a one-stop shop for supporting countries in the implementation of this type of survey. And of course, we are doing resource mobilization for scaling up these efforts. There is a specific interagency and expert group on agricultural rural statistics, which has a number of organizations, international organizations, and of countries that are also represented here, that could take on the job of developing the key aspect of the methodology of the definitions that needs to be developed, that I mentioned at the beginning. Of course, this should be followed by a global consultation, and I think especially for adopting a definition of small-scale producers, we need an adoption by the UN Statistical Commission in order to ensure that there is a buy-in by all countries, and so these international definitions are adopted at country level. And then, of course, the aspect of testing this methodology and implementing it at national level, adapting to the situation of each country. Of course, so in terms of global reporting mechanism, on one side, we would like to have this as part of the National Statistical Master Plan, so a key component of the planning process at country level. From the international point of view, the support can come from both from FAO and from the World Bank. The World Bank has announced that in the next 3 years they will do conduct multi-purpose surveys, LSMS survey, type of survey in 78 countries, and the intention is to have adopted this agricultural module in all of these surveys. We need, and we haven't talked about this, but of course, even if we scale up this type of efforts, there will be always data gaps, and countries will not report every year. So there will be a need to estimate data when country data are not available in order to produce regional and global estimates. And of course, this methodology can be discussed with countries. Countries can use this methodology themselves to come up with estimates when the surveys are not conducted. And this should be part of the normal reporting mechanism in order to produce, as I said, regional and global aggregates. And the idea then is that FAO is the custodian of the indicator, so collects the data from countries and then reports to the UNSD SDG database. A similar process needs to be done also for indicator 2.4.1. In this case, the target requires by 2030 to ensure sustainable food production systems and implement resilient agricultural practices. There is one indicator that has been selected, and is the percentage of agricultural area under productive and sustainable agriculture. So first of all, we see already a limitation of the indicator that doesn't cover resilience. So if we want to be compliant with the target, we would need to add an additional indicator to this indicator. In terms of definition of the indicator, the denominator is given by the agricultural area, that is the sum of total arable land, permanent crops, and permanent meadows and pastures. And the numerator is land area which is the most underdeveloped concept, is the land areas under productive and sustainable agriculture practices. And here, the idea would be to look at all the dimensions of sustainability, and some metrics have been tested, but we are still working on this, and the thresholds for defining what is sustainable, what is not sustainable. And so this requires a lot of work, methodological work with countries. This is work that is happening as we speak, but of course it will require some time before we reach an agreement on that. As I said, select the metrics that we want to identify as component of these sustainable management practices, the thresholds, and then of course we need to have harmonized data across countries in order to have comparable information and identify the most suitable data sources for providing this information. Testing the methodology has been done in 2 countries for the time being, but of course there is a need to have it done for a larger number of countries to see different country situation and in different continents. So this is clearly an indicator in tier 3 that needs a lot of methodological development and the peer review process. We have already started, as I said, and again, this interagency and expert group on agricultural statistics has been taking on this type of task, but of course we are open to discuss this also with the IAEG on SDGs and have a task team dedicated to this aspect. Also because the issue of sustainability run across many of the indicators and many of the goals and targets, and we need to ensure a harmonized approach also across indicators in how we measure sustainability. We think that Agris could be a major source of information for this indicator, and we are also developing, as I said, a questionnaire for this type of information. So the global reporting mechanism is, of course, national statistical agencies should be in charge of producing country data, and to the extent possible, or relying on existing information, even if we think that a major effort also in this case will need to be done in order to improve the data at country level. The indicator is expected to be produced on a global scale, covering both developing and developing countries, and we think that the earlier date in which we can start global reporting can be only 2018, because there is a long process of methodological development and review. Another indicator that has been classified as tier 3, and in this case we don't have the same type of evaluation of the indicator. Why is that? Because almost all countries in the world produce quite frequent information on prices, and in particular on food prices. And the type of indicator that is suggested here is just an algorithm to identify price volatility. If we look at the target, in fact, we see that the target require proper functioning of food commodity markets, timely access to market information in order to help limit extreme food price volatility. So the key objective is to limit food price volatility. So the denomination of indicator of food price anomalies, and the idea is to measure how many times we have price anomalies in a time series of food prices. This is the logic. And the algorithm, as I said, identification of changes in prices that are not normal, let's say, can be applied both at prices of primary food commodities at retail level in national markets, and prices of primary food commodities in international markets. And these two indicators provide different perspective, no? One is, in a way, looks more at the proper functioning of international markets, and if we have transparent information at international level. When we look at national markets, we look more at the impact of food price volatility on food security at country level. So the way to compute the indicator is to compute an annual compound growth rate of prices, to calculate the weighted average and the standard deviation of this compound growth rate, and then compare the actual food price with this compound growth rate in order to understand if the variation with respect to the base year is outside of the range of the standard deviation with respect to the weighted average. And then you count how many times you have this occurrence of abnormal price changes. And this gives you the indicator. As I said, this is just an algorithm. Other algorithms can be used. The main objective here is to measure, as I said, not price variation, but price volatility. And this type of indicator is currently used by FAO specifically as an early warning tool. And we have a website where we publish this type of information. The methodology has been already peer-reviewed especially by the community of the early warning community, together with the agencies that are mainly working in this area, so World Food Programme, FuseNet, and other organizations. Of course, at the moment, the coverage is covering 95 countries, so there is a need to expand the country coverage. The idea of estimating regional global aggregates when we don't have all the information at country level, and the possibility of aggregating at national level information when we have only, prices when we have only information on local markets. That happens in a number of countries. And then, of course, capacity development for compiling prices of food commodities and to report them to FAO. So the price tool has been available since 2009 and increased and progressively improved over time. The prices are obtained almost entirely from national statistical agencies or from their website. Currently, 95 countries are covered because the tool was mainly addressing developing countries and not developed countries. So there is a need and the plan to expand the coverage to cover some important developing countries and the developed regions, so all the countries in developed regions. An important aspect is, of course, the availability of data on the main local food markets. And then this will be the final presentation for Goal 2. And it's another indicator my colleague will present.
Thank you. So this is the Tier 3 indicator for target 2.5. Just to remind ourselves of the target aims to maintain the genetic diversity of plants and animals, and also to promote access and benefit sharing. This particular indicator only addresses the first of these components. The second component on access and benefit sharing is dealt with under target 15.6. So in terms of definitions, this indicator is really a dynamic measure of the plant and animal genetic diversity conserved in gene banks across time. And such type of conservation of genetic resources is generally the most trusted means of conserving genetic resources. Such resources conserved in medium or long-term conservation facilities can generally be used in breeding programs. And overall, this indicator would really give a good assessment of the overall extent to which we are managing to maintain or increase the total genetic diversity of plant and animal genetic material available for future production, and thus protected from permanent loss. In terms of current work on the indicator, first thing to clarify is that the two components would need to be counted separately. So for the plant component, this would be calculated as the number of accessions of plant genetic resources secured in either medium or long-term conservation facilities, and accessions have a clear definition as a distinct sample of seeds, planting materials, or plants maintained in a gene bank. For the animal component, it would be the number of local breeds with the quantity of genetic material stored within the gene bank, a collection sufficient to reconstitute the breed. So that is the threshold there. A bit more information on the current work, especially for the plant component here. This component is already monitoring the implementation of the second plan of action adopted by the FAO Commission on genetic resources for food and agriculture. It applies the FAO Biodiversity Multi-Crop Passport Descriptor, which is an internationally recognized standard for information exchange on plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. This component will be calculated by FAO in 2016. We already have over 3.5 million accessions conserved in 74 countries, and these will be documented by the end of April of this year. And reporting from these countries is scheduled to occur again in 2018. Currently, there is a biannual reporting cycle, and this has been agreed by the members of the Commission on Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. Some more details on the animal component.
I'm sorry, could you just
Yes.
wrap up just give us an update? I mean, we already have the work that you're doing, but may I request that we not be too detailed because we still have other presenters? Thank
Yes,
you.
absolutely. So the animal component is essentially why this indicator is currently categorized as Tier 3. It's really a new metric. The database is there, but country reporting has been not regular due to the fact that it's not still part of an official indicator. There is work going on for the development of methodology and international standards for both components. Obviously, the plant component is more advanced. In itself, this could perhaps be classified as a Tier 3, Tier 2 indicator. And in terms of the global reporting mechanism, there's already a system in place for the plan component. This is the World Information Early Warning System. There's ongoing data collection, and a snapshot of the world situation will be provided, we hope, by May of 2016. For the animal component, on the other hand, this will need to be requested by 2 countries by the Commission on Genetic Resources. There is ongoing data collection, but this will have to be hugely expanded. And for both components, we are looking to obtain a global coverage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the... Yes, Cuba, please.
Yes, first of all, thanks for your presentation, but I will appreciate if you send us all of the details of the presentation, but the problem is that we have only 3 days meeting. So I suggest that we must concentrate in the reasons of the indicators to be in this group or in another group, or the advances you have gotten on this indicator. I mean, otherwise we will not be able to analyze and to agree in anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is really a comment, and I'm requesting that the next presenters be very brief. What the expert group wants to hear is what you are currently doing. I believe, don't need details for now, but why we say that it is tier 3, and I think that was mentioned by our presenters. I would like to call on Botswana, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to support Cuba in terms of how we optimize on the time that we have. I think having received now some of the presentations from the international agencies, it is clear that we need to sort of change the approach to the presentations. Obviously, these agencies have done a lot of work, even covering global reporting and so on. So I would like to suggest and concur that these, having done that work, should be recognized, but really to be brief. You know, why are these indicators in tier 3 in terms of methodology, definitions, and so on? What needs to be done briefly in terms of the methodology and how the data then will be collected, and then maybe leave it there. That would be my suggestion. Leave out the other things. Thank you very much. Because we can't really be able to share with them. I hear some of them say, let's share, are they in the right direction? But if it's brief, then maybe we'll be able to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I would like to call on Brazil and then Sweden. Brazil, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, I'm fighting with the micro. 2 points I think is important. Looking at some indicators classified as tier 3 presented, and comparing with the classification of the Brazilian group of experts, who this indicator were classified as tier 1. It's interesting because we have to consider we need to do some kind of evaluation for exactly what this difference appear in the evaluation for the Brazilian evaluation, and we did evaluation for national conditions, but out of a global situations. Then, when we analyze the indicator and you classify a tier 1, we're thinking not just national, but global. And if you have a general proposal, this indicator is tier 3, I think we have to develop or establish a way to understand exactly why this kind of difference happens, to understand a little better the process we are dealing with. Of course, it could be very clear difference, And it's interesting to present difference between one national indicator, the one and the global is 3, or can be we have some disagreements about methodology. And I believe all other countries and we will present comments about the classification of the tiers. And of course, to finish, I think all the countries, all the persons involved in this need some time to a deep understanding of the presentation of this today. It's not this very quick presentation. We need more objective points to look and time to make analysis and digestion about everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All materials that will be presented in this meeting shall be available to be uploaded in the website, maybe, eventually? Yeah, okay. So may I call on Sweden, please?
Thank you very much. I have to say that I, on the other hand, am very happy that the presentators have been able to explain what's behind some of the indicators, because I really feel that that understanding is sometimes what we are lacking when we are looking at the different qualities of the indicators. I was wanting to say that for the one on sustainable agriculture, it would be of interest to see if we can use slightly different sets of criteria for different parts of the world, because I know that for the EU there is already data on that. And I'm supposing that the thing that is critical in the sustainability of the agriculture will be very different from one region to the next. So I think that's a way perhaps of making the data available a bit quicker if we can use some more regionalized criteria for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Kyrgyzstan, please.
Thank you. I have a question to FAO. I'm representing the region that is concerned as agricultural region, and all the indicators that we have in Goal 1, and that is FAO is a custodian agency, and as I understand, there are so many undefined or internationally not recognized definitions. Do you have any kind of an action plan or roadmap in order to overcome with this Tier 1 and the time limits when you're going to complete it and to work with the countries? Thank you.
So we have a question for FAO.
Yes, if we have an action plan. Yes, I've tried to explain this. Of course, the presentation was quite short, but we have a plan, we have a mechanism in place and a process for discussing the type of methodological advancement that we need to have and the international standards that we need to approve. So in a way, yes, there is. I can have a bilateral discussion with you and explain what are the steps that we think. In certain areas, as I said, that this will be quite a long process, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? If there are none, I would like to proceed to the next goal. Oops. US.
This is to FAO. Thank you very much for your presentation. In your follow-up materials after this meeting, in the information that you'll be sharing with this group, would be of interest to our country to understand, for example, how the AGRIS information collection that's proposed would, how we might compare it with our own national surveys, so that where there may be a difference in methodology or definition, we have a way of thinking about it and making adjustments earlier on where it makes sense, because I imagine, at least in the United States, we would prefer to the extent possible, to use our existing information collections. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was mentioned by FAO earlier that they will be consulting countries. But do you want to respond, Pietro?
Yes, of course. We have a very different country situation. We have already, in some countries, ongoing data collection, so there is no need of adding anything, or sometimes only to a marginal adjustment. So what we are developing in that case is standard questionnaire for covering certain type of information needs. And in that case, the task for countries will only need to be to adapt maybe the current data collection to these new international standards that we are going to develop. So in order to make sure that the information is collected and collected in an harmonized way, in a comparable way across countries, not to replace the current data collection initiatives, of course. Thank you.
Italy, please.
Thank you. I would like to ask a question to FAO about the data reporting mechanism. And if I well understood, we will have two streams for reporting, one to FAO-Stat and in another to UNSD databases, if I well understood. That's why I want to have a clarification from Faust, according to the slide that he produced, because he wrote and not or. So I would like to understand what is going in this data reporting mechanism. Thank you.
FAO, please. FAO, please. Microphone, please.
As we discussed this morning, the idea is that the international agencies continue to do their job of data collection at country level and continue to play this function of harmonizing data across countries and making data comparable. So this will be the work that we continue to do, and then when these data are compiled, they are then transmitted to UNSD. That's the simple answer. I hope I have answered.
I would like to say that the expert group is also going to discuss reporting mechanisms, so we will continue to be discussing this as well. If there are no other comments or questions, I would like to go to the next goal. I would like to request our presenters, I know that you have prepared presentations maybe, but per advice of our expert group, these are what we want to know. Why is this indicator tier 3? What is the current work that you are doing to develop methodology? And who are your collaborators? Who would be the expected agencies that will be working on this? So I think these are the 3 important questions that we want to hear. So I would like to request the next presenters to be very brief. I would like to call on 5 presenters actually. So we have the first is World Bank, followed by OHCHR, and then IMF, and then World Bank again. And we have DESA Population Division. After this, we will have a short break, just so everybody gets up and gets something to drink. Maybe it will be a 15-minute break, but let's now call on World Bank.
Okay, thanks. Which indicator are you asking about? Because I don't know. I'm surprised to hear that I'm called on to do 2 indicators for this. I thought only 10.7.2. Which one?
For indicator 10.2.1?
Yeah, we don't have anything on 10.2.1. I mean, apart from to say that is an indicator we can calculate from our existing database, but we haven't yet come up with any plan for that, but we will. So that's very short. That's probably shorter than anybody else will be today. So
it will be 10.7.1, right? It will be
the next one?
indicator 10.7.1.
So for that one, I have a short presentation.
Oh.
Yeah. So we've done 10.2.1, right? Okay. That's good. Sorry, can I just... Yeah. Can I use this? Okay. Thank you. So yeah, 10.7.1 is on recruitment costs for migrant employees in the country of destination. How does this work? Which one is it? Oh, here it is. Okay. Definition is recruitment costs borne by employee as a proportion of their yearly income earned at the country of destination. There are three components to that cost. The first is recruitment agency fees. The second and third are kind of the fixed costs of migrating to an employment position. And really it's the first one we want to focus on today because that's the difficult to measure part of this indicator, the fees that migrants often pay to get a job abroad. Now those fees can be very high. These are just two corridors. We don't have much data on this. That's why it's tier 3. Oh, there's the presentation. So the fees are very high in some countries. These are two corridors, Bangladesh to Kuwait, Pakistan to Saudi Arabia, and you can see the comparison between the agency fee and the transport cost in those. We've been doing data compilation on this for a few countries since 2014. And these are results from 6 specific surveys. It's not systematically collected now, and that's the point of it being tier 3. The methodology is new, it's difficult. It requires specific survey methodology, for example, of employees and migrants in their country of destination. You have to collect it using, looking at specific corridors because there are differences between different corridors. The migration team at the bank tell me there are about 2,000 of those, so it's complicated. It involves migrant surveys in destination, also sometimes in origin countries, and it usually involves receiving country labor agency or recruiting agency in some way. This is the process so far. These are the kind of institutional arrangements, I guess, that have been adopted to sort of make progress on this indicator. There's a thing called NOMAD, which is a partnership largely between the World Bank and ILO, and that's the main partnership between this nascent data collection and the development of methodology. Issues are discussed with member states through the Global Forum on Migration and Development, which many countries will be involved with, and agencies in the Interagency Global Migration Group. There's a data subgroup of that where this survey methodology is discussed. The indicator itself was identified through a consultative process a couple of years ago, and the questionnaire and strategies have been developed in partnership with many countries. I'll skip through this and just go to this one. How do we plan to report to the IAEG? I guess we'll submit details with ILO on the methodology and data collection to this group, but we'll also sort of test it out with the existing fora that we've been working with. We'll publish a database with some corridor-specific indicators based on some of those surveys we've talked about already on a designated website during 2016, and we'll continue to work through government agencies to collect data, especially through existing LFS surveys, and potentially from migration modules in other surveys. And that's it. So thank you very much. Oh, 10.C.1. I bet you should have stopped me. I don't know. No, I'm not going to discuss.
So thank you, Neil. That was 10.7.1.
That was 10.7.1.
So
yeah, that's what I.
Will you also be discussing with us 10.C.1?
I wasn't asked to discuss 10.C.1.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm sorry. So I've jumped the gun, haven't I? So I
you.
apologize for that. But I heard 10.7.1.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to open the floor now for any questions that we have for Neil, for World Bank. Okay, thank you very much. So may I now call on OHCHR, Nicola?
Thank you very much. So I will talk briefly about your indicator, brand new indicators proposed by the IAEG-SDGs group, which is has been proposed by the group on target 10.3 and as well as target 16.b. Which reads the proportion of the population reporting having personally felt discriminated against or harassed within the previous 12 months on the basis of a ground of discrimination prohibited under international human rights law. So we have indicated OHCHR that we could be a possible custodian for these indicators. We did that very recently. We don't have a proper plan of action to propose. So what I want to say is that we agree that it is a tier 3 indicators. the issues related to perception versus more objective event-based data that are at stake that we will need to discuss. So there is definitely work that needs to be done. We're talking of data collected through an household population survey that has similarities potentially with the victimization surveys. In terms of international standards, the grounds of discrimination referred to in the formulation of the indicators are stated in the international human rights instruments. Some of them would have universal definitions of relevance for global indicators. Others will need to be developed at a national level when we talked of issues, for instance, of ethnicity, but issues related to sex or disabilities or age would have universal definitions. I think the development of these indicators, the work is linked with the work that the working group on data disaggregation will carry out. So there will probably be a need for some linkages between the two work. There is also some work with some link with the work of the Prior-City group on governance statistics, because of some of the countries involved also in this city group have have developed indicators on those methodologies. So it's important to build on those experiences. So what I want to say is that it's actually a call for interest for developing these indicators, the methodology. So inviting the NSOs, the international organizations, the civil society organizations who have been working on this kind of indicators to come to us, OHCHR, and we will discuss how to move forward with these indicators. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicolas. We now call on IMF.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for asking and trusting the IMF with an indicator 10.5. To answer Lisa's question, why this is tier 3? And I think this is a different type of tier 3. So basically, you may recall that previously this indicator was to monitor the target 10.5, improve the regulation and the monitoring of global financial markets and institutions, and strengthen the implementation of such regulation. And the previous indicator was adoption of financial transaction test at the global level. But now, at the new decision after the debate is to have the IMF financial soundness indicators as this new indicator. So I guess the reason for tier 3 classification for now is we need further clarification and the deliberation on how best we could use the financial soundness indicators to monitor this target. So I just give you a very, very brief overview of what are the financial soundness indicators to help you to further consider this tier 3 definition. So for financial soundness indicators themselves, we have a well-established international standard and methodology. So to clarify at the very beginning, I want to mention there is no single indicator. It's 35 indicators included in these financial soundness indicators, ranging from regulatory capital adequacy ratios to real estate prices. So they're covering deposit takers, other financial corporations, non-financial corporations, households, market liquidity, real estate market, so on. So these are very wide-ranging. And for the methodology, we have a compilation guide recently we updated the compilation guide called 2016 FSI Compilation Guide. For the data availability, most of the FSI data begin from 2008, and now we have about 108 country reporters, about 55% of them reporting monthly and quarterly data. On the dissemination of FSIs, the data and the metadata provided by the national authorities are publicly available and downloadable from the IMF FSI website. So you can look at it from the fsi.imf.org. On the capacity development, we have ongoing efforts to support countries to collect FSI through regional workshop, and we have several ongoing projects. On the challenge going forward for this indicator, there are three main things I want you to be aware. One is how we can best select the indicators for these purposes among these 38, because I don't think it's feasible that we use the 38 to use as SDG indicators. So we have the option of selecting subset of them, and this is subject for our further consideration. The second, that not all the countries report all these 38 indicators. It varies in a great deal. Third one is the country use different methodology and concept. Although we have the compilation guide, but many countries have to follow their own national regulatory framework. So that's another challenge. So going forward, we look forward to the guidance from the IAEG members, and we will continue to work on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I call on our next presenter, Jorge. Jorge Bravo. Where's Jorge?
Hello. My name is Jorge Bravo. I am representing DESA, Population Division. But I'm speaking and making this brief presentation on behalf of both UN DESA and our colleagues from the International Organization for Migration present here in the room. IOM and DESA Population Division have been working on putting together proposals for this. It's 10.7 is the goal that calls for facilitating orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies. And the reason why this is Tier 3 is that there is not yet a universally accepted definition of well-managed migration policies. And this is the topic, main topic on which our colleagues from IOM and ourselves are struggling to come to some type of proposal that can be accepted more broadly. However, the situation is not so dire. In fact, we are optimistic that this indicator might be moving in the near future from Tier 3 to perhaps Tier 2 and even optimistically to Tier 1 in a little longer term future, because we're starting from two very good starting points or building blocks. One is a working definition of well-managed migration policies, which is based on the IOM's council endorsement or approval of a set of policy domains that would fall into that big concept, including institutional capacity and policy, migrant rights and integration, safe and orderly migration, labor migration and recruitment costs, international partnerships, humanitarian crisis and migration policy. The other very good starting point is that we already have an existing instrument to collect information on not just migration policies, but population policies more general. This is the United Nations inquiry among governments on population and development that has been mandated by the General Assembly in the early 60s and has been carried forward ever since. In fact, since 2004, it includes a specific module dedicated to policies on international migration. So there's basis for our optimism. What we are already doing is having intense discussions with IOM to come up with an adaptation of this existing instrument to collect information on the policy domains that correspond to the definition that at least is a good starting point for this topic. And we're trying to move as fast as possible, possibly get to an agreement on what that specific module of the inquiry will look like very soon, and going forward towards the second part of 2016, start implementing it and collecting data that can be then followed up over time. That's basically our plan, and we welcome any questions that you may have on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to open the floor for questions, comments. If there are none, we really appreciate the, Italy.
Okay. From our perspective, the target 10.7 could be more oriented to statistical indicators, as the last presenter said, because if we look into the policies, it's very difficult to have statistical indicators, and that's why we would like to suggest to reopen the discussion and on the 3 indicators, 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3, and from our perspective, we are much more interested to see, for example, salary gap between migrants and the national population, or government expenditure for migrants, or human trafficking by population classes, but only the detected people using administrative sources, and maybe experiment something related to non-detected people, look into the methodology inside the national accounts for the underground economy. But we are not sure that also from the national accounts we can have some information for non-detected people. Then we would like to have migrants, poverty of migrants. I know there is goal 1, but here again we would like to have something related to the concept of poverty for migrants. And finally, we would like to have also something related migration flows, maybe experimenting some geospatial data using some technologies, for example, satellites that can give us some inputs for just pick up information for designing migration flows. So this is our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that's the proposal and the plan of Italy. Am I correct, Fabiola? That's an Italian comment. Thank you very much. Other US, please.
Thank you. I especially appreciate the very focused presentation from my colleague at the IMF, Ho-Chi. We used to work together. And Ho-Chi specifically asked for inputs or guidance about the subset of indicators that would be most useful in relation to the indicator that she presented. And our colleague who spoke last about the migration policies also talked about the development of refinement of definitions. And I'm wondering if both of those speakers could speak to how they plan to receive inputs, either to answer IMF's question or to reach understanding and endorsement of a agreed upon definition of well-managed migration policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Another comment? Jorge?
Yes, thank you very much. The one thing I did not mention in my brief presentation is that in addition to IOM and UNDESA, we're also holding consultations with other members of the Global Migration Group, which includes many UN entities and UN entities that are not yet part of the UN. The IOM is on its way and to become part of the UN family very soon, we hope. And that is a group that provides a lot of technical expertise and knowledge, can contribute to refine this initial proposal, but very much based on agreement among member states interested in migration issues. Of course, we're open to any comment or suggestion once the concrete proposal for the module and the dimensions and the data that will be fed into it are out there. And be assured that all of this information, even though in the case of policies is mostly at its origin qualitative, we will transform that into information that is usable statistically, meaning in databases. From binary variables, a policy exists or does not exist to address this particular option, or in some cases perhaps a range of options in a given dimension. Thank you.
IMF, Ho-Chi, do you want to say something? Okay, thank you. It is my understanding from the various presentations that everybody, the presenters are open to comments directly to them. The expert group actually will appreciate that you are already doing all of this collaboration. So the potential custodians doing work now is really much appreciated by the expert group. Angela?
Just quickly, I just wanted to mention, since we are not listing as UNODC, that we would like to be part as one of the collaborative agencies, because we have indeed information on something that is clear and known, well-managed policy that is migrants, and where we have also quantitative information. So,
I think what is coming out of these presentations is what I really like, where possible collaborations can be forged, because now you are all listening to presenters, so you can reach out to each other and say that we want to be part of your discussion. Thank you. If there are no other comments or questions, I would like to close the discussion for goals 1, 2, and 10. And we have a quick break, 15 minutes. Everybody please come back. Then we go to goals 3, 4, and 5. We have less number of presenters, but after that we open the floor for other stakeholders' comments. So please come back in 15 minutes. Thank you.